It is inevitable that at some point in our career we will be asked to set an agenda or to put together a meeting. And when that happens, there are some best practices to follow to make the agenda go well and to ensure that you cover all of your bases. So this is a really simple slide deck. It's only got 10 or 11 slides, and it's just to talk about how to properly set a good agenda. Sometimes this is the first business thing that you're asked to do, and it's indicative of your capabilities. So I just want to give you some foundational pieces, and every agenda might be a little bit different because of the topic, but let's go from there. So what an agenda does actually is it sets the purpose of the meeting, the topics that are going to be covered, and ultimately the goals that you hope to achieve at the end of the meeting. But beyond that, what it does is it provides structure. I'm sure all of us have been to some type of a meeting where we go in and there's no structure and you don't get to cover any of the topics that you were hoping you were going to cover. And there seems to be no logic to the way topics are brought up. Those meetings may be fine if you're just doing a thinking process, but they're not good if you're trying to move along and get some sustainable recommendations for a topic. So really what an agenda does is it provides structure to a meeting and ensures that you cover the topics that you want to in the timeline that you want to cover it. People's time nowadays is very, very important, and it's hard to get a lot of people together, in a room. So when you do it, you have to make sure that you have the right structure to the meeting to accomplish the task. Obvious benefits, as discussed in the previous slide. Understanding your agenda will help to determine who you need to invite and who needs to be there in person versus who can be on the phone. And it gives some time for people to prepare. So especially if you're going to ask people to present or you're going to talk about topics that it would be better if there was some prep time provided. By doing an agenda, it gives people a little bit of an advance notice and says, here's what we're planning to cover, so come prepared to discuss it. And it can provide measurement. You can see what kind of progress you're making. And if you're in a company where you have to report to somebody as to what kind of progress you're making along a topic, you can say, we had a meeting, here was the agenda, this is what we accomplished. It always gave me a good sense of guidelines so that when I went to do a follow-up meeting, I could kind of go back and see what we covered and how much we got through. One of the challenges of setting a good agenda is to ensure that you handle the logistics well. Set a reasonable time, take into consideration if you have people who are going to be on the phone from a different country, how that interacts with the timeline that you set. Set a date that's far enough in advance so that people can put it on their calendars, but at the same time, it doesn't get so far out that they can cancel on you. Choose a place. Make sure you give a really good title to the agenda, one that tells people what this is supposed to be about. Invite everybody who's supposed to be invited and CC anybody who you want tangentially to know about it. And then if you need to, put in a dial-in or a video link, because sometimes what you need to do is you need to ensure that people who can't be there in person can at least have access to the information. And then send an invite. If you don't send an invite, don't trust that people are going to put it on their calendar. Make sure you send an invite so that people have to put it on their calendar. That way they have to accept. You'll get something that says so-and-so has accepted, and you'll know if there's anybody who needs to be contacted because they didn't accept. Make sure you let attendees know what they need to bring and what they need to prepare for, and ask if there are any topics that they think should be added. You need to give at least a 3-day notice when you send out the invite. I personally think you should give a week, at least a week, but sometimes you can't, and 3 days is what you can accomplish. Less than that just doesn't work well, and you'll get people who can't make it. Make sure you let them know what they need to bring and what they need to prepare for. It almost sounds like common sense to set the purpose, but you'd be surprised at how many meetings I've been to that really don't have a clear-cut purpose. Why are you holding the meeting? The title should say it all, but you want to make sure that you have a good purpose for having the meeting and provide any background information, especially if this is a follow-up or secondary meeting. You may have people who didn't attend the first meeting and you want to make sure that you bring them up to speed, so to speak, or somebody who joined the company after the first meeting was held, and you just want to make sure that they're aware of what was covered already in the first meeting so you don't have to go back and rehash it. Usually you want to leave a little bit of time for everybody to sort of chit chat and, get the niceties out of the way, and then you want to start with an introduction. Make sure everybody goes around, introduces themselves, whatever you think is appropriate, their title, their department, whatever. I usually try to be the first person to introduce myself, not the last. And the reason I do that is I want to set the tone. I want people to know what I'm expecting them to say. If you let somebody else do that and it's somebody who's a windbag and speaks a lot, then everybody's going to think they have to match that introduction and give that breadth of information. And you won't get to the meeting. You'll just get through the introductions. So my best recommendation is you go first. You set the tone. My name is Deb Casey. I'm from the sales and marketing department, and I've been involved with this issue since the beginning. That's it. Move on. And then point to each person as you go along so everybody gets an opportunity, and that way your introductions will go faster. Best practice is to get your old topics brought forward. If you're taking minutes, if you're in an educational environment or government environment, you have to take minutes of your meeting. And it's always a wise thing to do anyway, have somebody take minutes of the meeting, because then you don't have to go back if you're doing a follow-up meeting and rehash. You can send the minutes out attached to the secondary meeting and say, here's the minutes from the first meeting. So I usually ask somebody to take meeting notes, or maybe I take meeting notes, but it's a really good habit to get into. It also sets the stage in any company, or as I said, in an educational environment, we're required by the accreditation committees to keep notes of all of the meetings that we have, and I think it's just a really good practice. On your meeting invitation, when you have the topics listed, I usually put a small brief description of what that entails. If you leave it to other people to interpret what the topic entails, you might get a wide range of interpretation. So to focus that in a little more narrowly, if you put a small brief discussion, here's what we're going to be discussing and why, in the invitation, it saves that. Also, who's going to be covering that topic, who's going to start the discussion, and how long they're going to cover. Like maybe it's from 12 to 12:15, and what you hope you'll get accomplished from that. Those are just best practices. It doesn't always go this way, but when you can, it solves a lot of problems. With the meeting not going according to plan. It is definitely a best practice to set a timeline for each topic. Otherwise, you just won't get through anything. We've all had people in our meetings or in these types of meetings that they're a bit of a windbag, and as a result, you never get past the first topic. So by setting timelines, 12 to 12:15, 12:15 to 12:30, it forces the discussion, and you as the moderator of the meeting can say, we may have to table this for another meeting so we can get to the next topic. Introductions, 5 minutes, and so on and so forth. And I already covered about introductions. Finally, close with purpose. Decide right then and there if you need another meeting. If you do, try and get people to open up their calendars right there to see what an appropriate or good time or good day to have that is. It saves a lot of time going back and forth. And make sure you're working with the critical people that have to be at the meeting. And, if you can, if there's a to-do list, make sure if there's a call to action, somebody's going to do something between now and the next meeting, that they clearly know who they are. I used to also do a quick, as I said, the meeting notes, but I would also send those along to my boss just so he knows we had a meeting and here's what we discussed. If he chooses not to read them, he doesn't have to, but at least they're there. And that's it. That's how to put together a good agenda. Hopefully the first time you put one together, it will be great. And if you put them together on a regular basis, maybe you found something in here that you can use for a future one.